The funeral program crumples in my fist. Black ink bleeds across my palm, another stain that won't wash clean. I stand outside St. Mary's Methodist Church, watching shadows move behind stained glass windows. Inside, voices rise and fall like distant thunder. My grandfather's voice isn't among them. It never will be again. The parking lot stretches empty, except for luxury sedans and my rental car. I chose the spot farthest from the entrance. Old habits. In the field, you always know your exit routes. My name is Tara Morgan. I'm 42, Brigadier General in the United States Army. But to them, the people whispering behind black veils inside that church, I've always been the mistake. The girl who chose boots over brunches. The dress blues feel foreign after 3 months in civilian clothes. The fabric pulls tight across shoulders that remember carrying wounded soldiers. These hands have folded flags over coffins, signed death notifications, held the line when everything else fell apart. But I wasn't invited to hold the line today. A text message arrived Tuesday morning. 3 words from my sister. Grandpa passed. Private. Private. Like I was some stranger who might disturb their grief. Like 24 years of service meant nothing. Like Grandpa's stories about Korea, his pride when I made captain his letters during my deployments, like none of it happened. Through the glass, I catch glimpses of movement. My mother's silver hair catches the light as she accepts condolences. My father's hand rests on her shoulder, that same protective gesture I've seen him use with strangers. My sister Erin moves between pews like a graceful hostess, tissues ready, embraces offered. The perfect family, the complete circle. I was the oldest daughter, the responsible one, the invisible one. Maybe you've been erased too. Maybe you know what it feels like to serve something bigger than yourself, to sacrifice pieces of your soul for duty, only to discover that the people you protected couldn't be bothered to save you a seat at the table. The church doors open. Mourners file out their voices, carrying across the parking lot. I recognize some faces, neighbors from childhood family friends who used to ruffle my hair and call me Little Soldier. Their eyes slide past me like I'm part of the landscape. Mrs. Patterson from down the street stops near my car. She squints through her bifocals, recognition dawning slowly. Tara, is that you, dear? I nod. The weight of her stare feels heavier than combat gear. I'm so sorry about your grandfather. He was so proud of you. Her voice drops to a whisper. I saw him at the grocery store last month. He had pictures. You in uniform, some medal ceremony? The Bronze Star. I'd sent him the photos from Afghanistan. He kept them in his wallet next to a faded image of his own unit from Seoul. Thank you, I manage. She glances toward the church, then back at me. I thought you'd be, inside. Family only, I say. The words taste like ash. Mrs. Patterson's face crumples, but she doesn't ask more questions. She pats my arm once, a gesture that feels more like benediction than comfort, and walks away. More people emerge. Cousins I haven't seen in years. My Aunt Susan, Grandpa's youngest daughter. She spots me and freezes. For a moment, I think she might approach. Instead, she turns and hurries toward the parking lot's other end. My phone buzzes. A text from my sister, please don't make this harder than it has to be. I don't reply. Making things hard isn't my job anymore. The last of the mourners disappear into their cars. The parking lot empties until only family remains, my parents, my sister, a few close relatives forming a tight cluster near the church steps. They speak in low voices, heads bent together like they're sharing secrets. I've spent my career reading situations, assessing threats, understanding the terrain. This moment has the same weight as a pre-mission briefing. Everyone knows their role, except me. The church doors close with a soft thud. I sit in my rental car for another hour, watching the building grow dark. The silence feels different here than in the field. In combat zones, silence means danger. Here, it means abandonment. My reflection stares back from the rearview mirror. Same brown eyes as Grandpa. Same stubborn jawline. Same hands that he taught to tie knots and read maps when I was 8 years old. Some people salute flags, he used to say. Some people salute money. Some people salute whoever's loudest. But you'll walk your own line, Captain. He called me Captain long before I earned the rank. Long before I understood what walking your own line would cost. The funeral is over. The family has spoken. The decision has been made, but I'm still here, still breathing, still carrying his name and his lessons and the weight of everything they think I wasted. Maybe that's enough. Maybe that's where the real story begins. The drive back to the hotel takes me through neighborhoods I mapped in my mind 30 years ago. Suburban Maryland stretches in perfect grids, lawns measured to regulation-length mailboxes aligned like soldiers at attention. Nothing changes here, nothing is supposed to. Our house sits on Maple Street, third from the corner. White colonial with black shutters and a wraparound porch where my mother still places seasonal decorations. Halloween pumpkins gave way to Thanksgiving gourds, then Christmas wreaths, Easter lilies. A calendar of appearances. I slow the car, but don't stop. The upstairs window on the left was mine. Erin's room faced the back garden where she could see the swing set and the cherry tree that bloomed pink every April. Even our bedroom assignments told the story. Erin was 3 years younger and everything I wasn't. Golden hair that caught sunlight like spun silk. A laugh that made adults lean closer. She moved through the world like it was designed for her comfort, and maybe it was. I was the prototype. The rough draft. The practice child. My memories of those years feel like watching someone else's home movies. There I am at 7 building elaborate structures with my grandfather's old engineering books spread across the living room floor. Lincoln logs arranged in perfect formations. Lego cities with working traffic patterns. She's so serious, my mother would tell visitors, her voice carrying that particular note mothers use when discussing disappointing vegetables. Always organizing something, never just playing. Erin played. Ballet classes every Tuesday and Thursday. Piano lessons on Saturdays. Art camp in the summers, where she made clay sculptures that my mother displayed on the mantel like treasures. I built bridges out of popsicle sticks and tested their weight capacity with my father's engineering textbooks. When they held, I felt the same pride I'd later experience leading successful missions. When they collapsed, I studied the failure points and rebuilt stronger. Too rigid, my father would say, watching me work. Life isn't an equation, Tara. Sometimes you need to bend. But I saw how bending worked in our house. Erin bent into shapes that pleased everyone. She curved her spine into perfect port-de-bras. She tilted her head at angles that made photographers smile. She folded herself into whatever space they needed her to fill. I couldn't bend that way, wouldn't. The science fair in 8th grade was my Normandy. I'd spent 3 months building a working model of a water purification system, the kind that could save lives in disaster zones, the kind that mattered. I remember standing beside my display board wearing my best dress navy blue with a white collar that made me look like a junior accountant. Other kids had volcano models and solar system mobiles. I had engineering. The judges spent 20 minutes at my table. They asked questions about filtration rates and bacterial contamination. I answered with the precision of a briefing officer, citing sources and explaining methodology. When they pinned the first place ribbon to my board, I felt something I couldn't name then, but recognized now the satisfaction of being seen for what I could do, not what I looked like doing it. I ran home with the ribbon clutched in my fist, burst through the front door like a soldier returning from victory. Mom, Dad, I won. My mother looked up from the magazine she was reading. People with some actress on the cover whose name I've forgotten. That's nice, honey. Nice. The word landed like a spent bullet. My father barely glanced up from his newspaper. Good for you, kiddo. Then Erin walked into the room fresh from her ballet lesson. Her hair was swept into a perfect bun, not a strand out of place. She'd gotten it cut that week, shorter layered, framing her face in a way that made her look older, more sophisticated. Oh my God, Erin, my mother dropped the magazine. Turn around, let me see. For the next hour, they discussed highlights and styling products. My father offered to drive her to the salon next week for a trim. Neighbors were called to come admire the transformation. The science fair ribbon sat forgotten on the kitchen counter until I finally moved it to my bedroom, where it lived thumbtacked to the wall above my desk. But Grandpa noticed. He found me there that evening staring at the ribbon like it might explain something important about the universe. First place, huh? He settled into the chair beside my desk, his joints creaking like old door hinges. Tell me about this contraption. So I did. I explained filtration and purification and the places in the world where clean water was a luxury. I showed him my research notes, my calculations, my plans for improvements. He listened with the intensity of a general receiving battle plans. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "You know what I see when I look at this," he finally said. I shook my head. "I see someone who builds things that matter. Someone who thinks about people she's never met in places she's never been and figures out how to help them." He pointed at the ribbon. "That's not just smart, Captain. That's character. Captain. The name that would define me before I knew what it meant. Your grandmother used to say that some people are born to make noise and some people are born to make things work. Guess which one you are." I looked at the ribbon again. In the overhead light, it seemed to glow. "Some people salute flags." He continued, his voice dropping to that conspiratorial tone he used when sharing important secrets. "Some people salute integrity. You'll walk your own line." I didn't understand then what walking your own line would cost. I didn't know it would mean standing outside churches excluded from the goodbye I'd earned the right to say. I didn't know it would mean choosing service over safety duty, over comfort, honor, over belonging. But I understood enough. I understood that Grandpa saw something in me that no one else bothered to look for, something worth naming, something worth nurturing, something worth remembering 30 years later, when the girl who built bridges finds herself standing on the far side of a canyon, looking back at the family who never learned to cross. The hotel room key feels heavy in my hand. Tomorrow I'll drive back to my life. Tonight I'll remember the weight of that ribbon and the man who taught me that some victories are worth more than applause. Some victories are worth everything. The ROTC recruitment table sat in the corner of the University Student Center, almost hidden behind displays for sororities and study abroad programs. I found it during my sophomore year, drawn by the neat rows of brochures and the calm certainty of the uniformed officer answering questions. Structure, purpose. A place where building bridges mattered more than looking pretty while crossing them. I signed up that afternoon. The call home that evening lasted exactly 4 minutes. The Army. My mother's voice carried the same tone she'd used when I announced I wanted to major in engineering instead of education. "Tara, honey, you're wasting your femininity." My father's response came through the phone speaker. "It's not exactly what we had in mind for you, kiddo." In the background, I could hear Aaron practicing piano. Something classical and complicated that made the house sound like a movie scene. Something that required delicate fingers and perfect timing. "I've already committed," I said. "Well, you can uncommit." My mother's voice sharpened. "This is probably just a phase. You're trying to prove something. Maybe I was. Maybe I was trying to prove that some things mattered more than looking like you belonged. Maybe I was trying to prove that Grandpa's vision of me, the captain who walked her own line, was worth more than their disappointment. "I'll call you after basic training," I said. The line went quiet. "Then, if you insist on doing this, at least don't post about it on social media. People will ask questions." People. Always people. The invisible audience that governed every decision in our house. Basic training at Fort Benning arrived like a slap of Georgia heat. August humidity that clung to everything. Drill sergeants who screamed orders in accents thick as molasses. Obstacle courses that left blisters on top of blisters. I loved every miserable minute. For the first time in my life, effort mattered more than appearance. Sweat was proof of work, not evidence of failure. The woman next to me during push-ups didn't care about my hair or my clothes or whether I smiled enough. She cared whether I could keep up. I could. The letters I wrote home during those 8 weeks were exercises in hope. I described the rifle range where I qualified expert on my first attempt. I wrote about leadership training, about learning to read maps under pressure, about the satisfaction of completing a 20-mile ruck march. I wrote about finding my place. The letters came back unopened. Return to sender address unknown, but I knew the address. I'd lived there for 18 years. Graduation day arrived with the same brutal heat that had welcomed me. My dress uniform felt like armor, crisp, precise, earned. I stood in formation with 97 other new soldiers, listening to speeches about duty and honor and service to something greater than ourselves. The ceremony ended with families rushing onto the field, mothers crying, fathers shaking hands with drill sergeants, younger siblings asking to try on campaign hats. I stood alone watching the reunions unfold around me like flowers blooming in fast forward. That night, I found a photographer in town, a small studio that specialized in military portraits. The woman behind the camera was a Navy veteran who understood the weight of the moment. "First uniform?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am. It shows." She adjusted the lighting, positioned me in front of a blue backdrop. "You wear it like you earned it." The photograph arrived 2 weeks later. I looked older than my 20 years, more serious. The uniform transformed me into someone I was still learning to become. Someone who belonged somewhere. I mailed copies to my parents and sister. One picture each with a note: graduated, commissioned, proud. The phone didn't ring. The mailbox stayed empty. Erin called 3 weeks later, her voice bright with practiced cheer. "So how's the soldier thing going?" "It's going well. Mom said you sent pictures. Very official looking." A pause. "Listen, I'm getting married next spring. David proposed last weekend. It's going to be a small ceremony, nothing fancy, but congratulations. The thing is, we're trying to keep it simple. Family and close friends. You understand." I understood. The uniform didn't match the aesthetic. The soldier didn't fit the story they wanted to tell. "I understand," I said. "It's nothing personal. It's just, you know how these things are." I knew. I'd always known. After that conversation, something shifted. The part of me that had spent 20 years reaching for their approval finally stopped stretching. My hands had better things to do. These hands learned to field strip weapons in darkness, to apply pressure to wounds that wouldn't stop bleeding, to fold flags into triangles that would comfort grieving families. These hands signed orders that sent soldiers into harm's way, carried stretchers, gripped the shoulders of young men and women who needed to know they weren't alone. These hands served their country with honor. They built bridges across rivers and relationships across cultures. They held the line when everything else fell apart. But they never once carried a thank you from home. The silence became familiar, expected. Sometimes I'd catch myself reaching for the phone to share news, a promotion, a commendation, a successful mission. Then I'd remember they'd made their choice, so I made mine. I chose the family that chose me back. The soldiers who understood that some battles are worth fighting even when the people you're fighting for don't know your name. Especially then. The promotions came like clockwork. Second lieutenant to first lieutenant to captain. Each ceremony a small victory that echoed in empty spaces. I stopped sending invitations after the first few went unanswered. Instead, I sent postcards, brief updates written in the margins of distant places. Made major, stationed in Kuwait. Promoted to lieutenant colonel, deployment extended. Colonel now, Afghanistan keeps me busy. The postcards came back with worn edges and foreign stamps, proof they'd traveled further than any message from home ever would. Deployments blurred together like landscapes seen from transport planes. Iraq's endless sand, Afghanistan's brutal mountains, Africa's humid heat that made Georgia summers feel like air conditioning. Each assignment carried the same weight: Americans in harm's way, depending on leaders who understood the cost of decisions. I understood. The convoy attack happened during my second tour in Afghanistan. Route clearance mission along Highway 1, where improvised devices waited like buried prayers for the wrong gods. We'd made the run dozens of times. Routine had become our enemy. The explosion lifted our lead vehicle off the road and deposited it upside down in a ditch. Metal screamed. Fuel ignited. The kind of chaos that separates training from instinct. I was out of my vehicle before the smoke cleared, moving toward the wreckage, where voices called for help. Private Martinez was trapped underneath the turret, his leg twisted at an angle that made my stomach clench. "Ma'am," his voice came through smoke and blood. Can't feel my leg, ma'am. 22 years old, from San Antonio, joined the Army to pay for college, carried pictures of his daughter in his helmet band. I crawled into the wreckage, ignoring the heat that singed my eyebrows. The metal groaned like a living thing threatening to collapse. Martinez's eyes were wide with the particular terror of young soldiers who've just learned that war is personal. "I got you," I told him. "We're getting out of here." It took 17 minutes to extract him. 17 minutes of pulling and lifting and refusing to accept that physics might win. When we finally dragged him clear, he looked up at me through the smoke and said, "Thank you, ma'am." Ma'am. The word carried weight that daughter or sister never had. He lived. Lost the leg below the knee, but lived. went home to San Antonio and his daughter, and a life that continued because 17 minutes had mattered more than 17 years of being invisible. The Bronze Star citation arrived 3 months later, for exceptionally meritorious service in a combat zone and heroic actions that saved the life of a fellow soldier. Signed by a general who understood that some moments define everything that comes after. I held the medal in my hotel room in Kabul, feeling its weight against my palm. The ribbon was red, white, and blue silk that caught the light like hope. The award ceremony was small. A handful of soldiers gathered in a conference room that smelled of coffee and determination. The general who pinned the medal to my uniform was a woman who'd walked similar paths, faced similar fires. "You represent the best of what we do here," she said. "Your actions saved a life, but more than that, they reminded everyone present what leadership looks like under pressure." That night, I sent a photograph home. Me in dress uniform, the Bronze Star, bright against my chest. I wrote on the back, "Afghanistan, Bronze Star for heroism. Thought you'd want to know." The package never came back. No return to sender this time. It simply disappeared into the same silence that had swallowed every other attempt at connection. 2 days later, my phone buzzed with a social media notification. Someone had tagged me in a photo from Aaron's art gallery opening. The image showed my sister in a black cocktail dress, champagne flute raised in a toast. My parents flanked her, beaming with pride that seemed to glow from the screen. The caption read, "Celebrating our talented daughter's first solo exhibition. So proud of our artist, not their artist, ours. The collective ownership of achievement that I'd never earned." I scrolled through the comments, dozens of congratulations, hearts and exclamation points. Neighbors and family friends celebrating success that fit their understanding of what mattered. Not one mention of the daughter who'd pulled a soldier from a burning vehicle 6,000 miles away. The silence had become a language I understood fluently. Each unanswered postcard was a sentence. Each ignored achievement was a paragraph. Each celebration that excluded me was a chapter in a story that had never included me as anything more than a minor character. I learned to read the spaces between their words, the gaps where my name should have been, the empty seats at tables where I'd never been invited to sit. But I also learned something else. I learned that some tables aren't worth sitting at, some families aren't worth joining, some approval isn't worth earning. The medals I earned came from people who understood the weight of service. The respect I commanded came from soldiers who'd seen me make decisions that mattered. The family I built came from shared sacrifice and mutual trust. The Bronze Star sits in a display case in my office now, next to commendations from Iraq and Afghanistan and places whose names I can't mention. Each one represents moments when training became action, when leadership became love, when duty became everything. They represent the woman I became when I stopped trying to become who they wanted. Martinez sent me a Christmas card last year. His daughter's school photo was tucked inside along with a note. She wants to be a soldier, like the lady who saved her daddy. Thank you for showing her what strong looks like. Some thank yous are worth more than others. Some thank yous are worth everything. The mortgage application was supposed to be a formality. 24 years of military service, steady income, perfect payment history. The kind of paperwork that should process itself. Instead, I sat across from a loan officer whose expression had shifted from professional courtesy to uncomfortable confusion. "I'm sorry, Colonel Morgan, but there seems to be an issue with your credit profile." The words felt foreign. In 2 decades of deployments, I'd never missed a payment. Every bill automated, every account managed with the same precision I applied to mission planning. "What kind of issue?" She turned her computer screen toward me. Numbers glowed in neat columns, but they made no sense. Credit utilization, 89%. Available funds, $847. Multiple late payments spanning 3 years. My hands went cold. "This can't be right. I've been deployed. Everything's been on autopay. According to our records, you've been flagged as a credit risk since 2019. Multiple accounts show irregular activity." She scrolled through screens of data that felt like reading about someone else's life. "There are also several real estate transactions listed under your social security number." Real estate transactions. I'd never owned property beyond a small savings account and my retirement fund. The drive back to my temporary housing felt like navigating through fog. Numbers swirled in my head, account balances, that should have been substantial after years of combat pay and hazard duty allowances. Money I'd saved for exactly this moment when military life would transition to civilian stability. Money that had apparently evaporated while I was pulling soldiers from burning vehicles. The phone calls started that afternoon, first my bank in Maryland, then my credit union. Then accounts I'd forgotten about military savings deployment funds, the emergency account I'd set up after my first tour. Each conversation followed the same pattern: authorized withdrawals, approved transfers, signatures that matched my handwriting perfectly because they were my handwriting, just not my authorization. The pattern emerged like developing photographs in a dark room, slow revelation of something that had always been there waiting for the right light to make it visible. Power of attorney. I'd signed the documents before my first deployment to Afghanistan, a routine precaution that allowed my family to handle financial emergencies while I was overseas. Standard procedure for soldiers heading into combat zones where communication could be spotty and urgent decisions might need to be made. I'd trusted them with access to everything. They'd taken everything. The forensic accountant I hired worked like a detective following paper trails that stretched across continents and time zones. Wire transfers authorized while I was in firefights. Real estate purchases signed while I was treating wounded soldiers. Investment accounts liquidated during operations I couldn't discuss with anyone who lacked security clearance. Each discovery hit like physical blows. A vacation home in Florida bought with my combat pay. Investment properties purchased with money I'd saved for my post-military life. Bank accounts emptied to fund renovations on my parents' house, upgrades I'd never seen, never approved, never benefited from. The amount staggered me. Over $600,000 siphoned away over 8 years while I served in places where a bottle of water cost more than most people spent on lunch. But the worst revelation came buried in legal documents that had been filed and forgotten. Grandpa's will dated 2 years before his death. The document that should have been read at his funeral in front of family and friends who would witness the final words of a man who'd spent his life building something worth leaving behind. The will that named me as sole beneficiary of his estate, his house on Maple Street, the one where I'd learned to read maps and build bridges and understand that some people were worth becoming. His savings account modest but substantial. His personal effects including his Korean War medals and the photographs he'd kept of my military ceremonies. Everything that proved I'd mattered to someone. Everything they'd hidden. The lawyer who'd drafted the will had sent multiple notices to my parents' address, the same address I'd listed as my permanent residence during deployments. Certified letters requesting my presence for the reading. Legal documents that required my signature to process the estate. Letters that were never forwarded. Documents that were never signed. An inheritance that was never claimed because I was never told it existed. Instead, they'd allowed the estate to remain in legal limbo, using their continued residence in the house as evidence of ongoing family stewardship. They'd maintained the property, paid the taxes, and waited for the statute of limitations to make their occupation permanent. They'd stolen my grandfather's house while I was fighting wars to protect the country that house represented. The evidence sat spread across my hotel room desk like battlefield intelligence. Bank statements and legal documents and credit reports that painted a picture I'd been too trusting to see. While I'd been earning medals for heroism, my family had been earning interest on my sacrifice. The phone rang at 11 p.m., my sister's number. "Tara, I heard you were asking questions about finances." Her voice carried the same bright cheer it had always carried, but underneath I could hear something new. Nervousness, the sound of someone who'd been caught. "I'm asking questions about theft, Aaron. Don't be dramatic. We managed your money while you were gone. We made investments. Some of them didn't work out. Investments like your wedding, like Mom and Dad's kitchen remodel, like the vacation house in Florida I've never seen." Silence stretched across the connection. When she spoke again, the cheer was gone. "You were never good with money. We were protecting you from yourself. You were stealing from me while I was at war. We were family handling family business. You signed the papers. I signed papers giving you emergency access. I didn't sign papers giving you permission to steal my future." Another pause. Then, "What do you want, Tara?" The question hung in the air between us. What did I want? Justice, revenge? An apology that would never come? Money that could never restore the trust they'd destroyed? What I wanted was to have mattered enough for them to consider that their actions had consequences, that their choices had victims, that their daughter, sister, granddaughter deserved better than being treated like a bank account they could raid whenever convenient. What I wanted was impossible. I want Grandpa's house, I said finally. I want what he left me. That's not possible. We live there. It's been the family home it's my house. He left it to me. The will is clear. Good luck proving that in court. The line went dead. I sat in the silence surrounded by evidence of betrayal and realized something had shifted. The part of me that had spent 30 years trying to earn their love had finally died. The part that remained was all soldier. The house on Maple Street looks smaller than memory. The white colonial with black shutters sits behind a lawn that could pass military inspection. Fall decorations cluster around the front door. Pumpkins and corn stalks, arranged with the same precision my mother brings to everything that might be seen by neighbors. I park in the driveway where I learned to ride a bicycle 35 years ago. The same concrete where I'd practiced drill formations with imaginary soldiers. Where Grandpa had taught me to read compass bearings, using the front porch as magnetic north. My mother answers the door wearing the smile she reserves for unexpected guests. Polite, measured, designed to convey welcome without commitment. Tara, what a surprise. Come in, come in. The living room hasn't changed. Same furniture arranged in perfect symmetry. Same family photographs on the mantle, though I notice my military portraits are absent. Aaron's wedding pictures dominate the display, professional shots that capture joy like butterflies in amber. I'll make tea, my mother says, disappearing into the kitchen with the practiced efficiency of someone who's built a life around small rituals. My father looks up from his newspaper, the Sunday edition spread across the coffee table like a territorial claim. He nods once the way he might acknowledge a delivery driver. Tara, wasn't expecting you. I wasn't planning to come. The folders I carry feel heavier than combat gear. Evidence organized with the same methodical precision I'd once applied to mission briefings. Bank statements, legal documents, wire transfers, a paper trail that tells the story of systematic theft disguised as family assistance. My mother returns with a tea service that probably cost more than most soldiers make in a month. Bone china cups with gold trim, sugar cubes arranged in precise rows, the kind of presentation that suggests this conversation will be civilized regardless of its content. She settles into her chair with practiced grace. So what brings you home? I place the first folder on the coffee table. Bank statements fan out like playing cards, showing a losing hand. These bring me home. My father glances at the papers, his expression shifting from mild irritation to something approaching concern. My mother's teacup pauses halfway to her lips. What are we looking at, he asks. $600,000 in unauthorized transactions. 8 years of financial fraud. Power of attorney abuse. I open the second folder. Real estate purchases made with my combat pay while I was pulling soldiers out of burning vehicles. The silence stretches like a held breath. My mother sets down her teacup with deliberate care. Tara, honey, you're being dramatic. I slide a document across the table. This is a wire transfer for $40,000 authorized while I was in Afghanistan. It went toward your kitchen renovation. The one I've never seen because I've never been invited to see it. My father sighs, the sound of a man confronting inconvenient reality. You were gone, Tara. We made decisions. That's not betrayal. It's reality. Whose reality? Adult reality. The kind that involves managing finances and making investments and handling responsibilities while other people are off playing soldier. Playing soldier. The words hit like shrapnel. My mother leans forward with that same cold smile I remember from childhood. The expression she wore when explaining why I couldn't have what I wanted. You never liked this world anyway, Tara. We just assumed you wouldn't want the burden. The burden of having money, the burden of owning property, the burden of being told when my grandfather died. You were always so independent, so determined to do everything yourself. Her voice carries the patient tone of someone explaining simple concepts to a child. We thought we were helping. Erin appears in the doorway like she's been summoned, still beautiful, still graceful, still moving through the world like it was designed for her comfort. She avoids my eyes, focusing instead on the papers scattered across the coffee table. When she finally speaks, her voice is barely above a whisper. You were always more soldier than sister. We thought we were helping. Helping. The word that transforms theft into charity, betrayal into favor. I gather the documents back into their folders. The evidence disappears, but the truth remains hanging in the air between us like smoke from a distant fire. I fought for a country that saw me clearer than my own family ever did. The words emerge without heat, without anger, just observations spoken with the same calm I'd used to report casualty figures and mission status. My father's newspaper rustles as he turns a page. Don't be so dramatic, Tara. I'm not being dramatic. I'm being accurate. My mother reaches for her teacup again. Well, what's done is done. We can't change the past. No, I agree, but I can change the future. I stand folders tucked under my arm like classified intelligence. The same movement I'd made 1,000 times leaving briefings that would determine whether people lived or died. Grandpa's will leaves everything to me. The house, the savings, everything. That will was never properly processed, my father says, without looking up from his paper. It will be now. I walk toward the door past photographs that tell the story of a family that learned to celebrate in my absence, past furniture that was purchased with money I'd earned while people shot at me, past the life they'd built on the foundation of my sacrifice. At the threshold, I turn back. They're sitting exactly as I'd left them. My mother with her teacup, my father with his newspaper, Aaron standing in the doorway like a beautiful statue. None of them are looking at me. Thank you, I say. My mother glances up confused. For what? For showing me exactly who you are. The door closes behind me with the same soft sound it made when I left for my first deployment. The same finality, the same sense of crossing into territory where the rules were different and the stakes were real. But this time, I'm not coming back. The law office sits 3 blocks from the Pentagon, in a building where military attorneys handle the kinds of cases that emerge when service members discover the home front wasn't holding the line. Sarah Mitchell is a Navy veteran turned civilian lawyer who specializes in what she calls deployment exploitation. Her office walls display certificates and commendations alongside photographs of aircraft carriers and courtrooms, 2 different kinds of service that require similar precision. Your case is textbook, she says, sliding a legal brief across her desk. Criminal fraud, elder abuse, fiduciary breach. We have documentation spanning 8 years and evidence of systematic financial exploitation. The forensic accountant, a retired Air Force colonel named Robert Davis, adds his assessment with the clinical precision of someone who's spent careers dissecting complex operations. They were methodical. Monthly transfers timed to your deployment schedules. Investment purchases made during blackout periods when communication was limited. They knew exactly when you'd be unable to monitor your accounts. Sarah opens another folder. The power of attorney abuse alone carries felony charges. Add the elder abuse hiding your grandfather's will using his property, while preventing you from claiming your inheritance, and we're looking at federal crimes. Federal crimes. The words hang in the air like ordnance waiting to detonate. What are we talking about in terms of consequences? I ask. Prison time, Sarah says without hesitation. Asset forfeiture, criminal restitution. If we pursue this aggressively, your family faces complete financial ruin and potential incarceration. Robert nods. We could freeze their assets tomorrow, force the sale of properties purchased with your money, make this a public case that follows them for the rest of their lives. I think about my sister's art gallery, my parents' renovated kitchen, the life they've built on the foundation of my sacrifice, brick by brick, transaction by transaction. What about Grandpa's will? That's separate, Sarah explains. The estate claim is civil law. We can force probate immediately. You're the named beneficiary, and the statute of limitations for will contests hasn't expired. That house is legally yours. How long? 6 weeks, maybe 8 if they contest, but they have no grounds. The will is clear, properly witnessed, and filed with the county clerk. I stare at the legal documents spread across the conference table. Each page represents a weapon I could use to destroy the people who destroyed my trust. Complete vindication, total victory. The question is, Sarah says, leaning back in her chair, do you want justice or scorched earth? Justice or scorched earth? The choice every commander faces when determining response to enemy action. Proportional force or overwhelming dominance. I need time to think. That night, I sit in my hotel room with the lights off. The city glows beyond my window, thousands of lives unfolding in illuminated squares, each one carrying its own weight of choices and consequences. My medals rest on the desk like artifacts from another life. The bronze star catches streetlight and throws it back in fragments. 24 years of service reduced to ribbon and medal, but carrying the weight of every decision that mattered. Grandpa's will lies beneath them, the document that proves I mattered to someone who understood the difference between serving yourself and serving something greater. I think about Private Martinez, whose leg I'd saved in Afghanistan, about the young soldiers I'd trained who now lead their own units, about the bridges I'd built, literal and metaphorical, that still carry weight years after their construction. I think about my family sitting in their renovated kitchen, probably discussing damage control, planning their response to the threat I represent, calculating how to minimize the consequences of choices they'd made while I was keeping other people's families safe. The medals seem to whisper stories of moments when I'd chosen duty over comfort, honor over advantage, service over self. Moments when the right choice wasn't the easy choice, but it was the choice that let me sleep at night. Morning arrives with the clarity that comes after decisions crystallize into certainty. I call Sarah at 8 a.m. I've made my decision. And no court, no headlines, no criminal charges. Silence stretches across the connection. When she speaks, her voice carries professional confusion tinged with personal respect. Tara, you could destroy them completely. They deserve everything we could throw at them. Probably, but I'm not going to do it. Why? I look at the medals scattered across the desk, at the will that represents my grandfather's faith in the woman I'd become. Let them keep their names. Let them keep their reputations. Let them keep their renovated kitchen and their vacation house and their comfortable lives built on money they stole while I was at war. And I'll build mine. What about the house? The house is mine. Grandpa left it to me and I'm claiming it, but quietly, legally, no drama. Tara, I spent 24 years serving a country that believes in justice, but justice isn't always about punishment. Sometimes it's about becoming someone better than the people who wronged you. The phone goes quiet. When Sarah speaks again, her voice carries something I hadn't heard before. Understanding, maybe, or respect. You're sure, or I'm sure. Some victories are won in courtrooms. Others are won in the quiet moments when you choose who you want to be when no one is watching. I choose dignity. I choose strength. I choose to walk my own line. The invitation never came. Not that I expected one. Instead, I learned about Grandpa's funeral, the way strangers learn about community events, through the obituary section of the local newspaper. Private service for family and close friends. Time and location listed like a classified briefing I wasn't cleared to attend. But some clearances come from higher authorities than family politics. I arrive at St. Mary's Methodist Church 15 minutes before the service begins. The same parking lot where I'd stood excluded just weeks ago now hosts a gathering of people who knew Grandpa as neighbor, friend, fellow veteran. People who understood that some men earn respect through decades of quiet service. My dress blues feel different this time. Not foreign or performative, but like armor worn by someone who's earned the right to carry its weight. I walk through the front doors without hesitation. The sanctuary buzzes with subdued conversation. Mourners fill wooden pews, their voices creating the particular hum of shared grief. At the front, a flag-draped casket rests beneath stained glass windows that cast colored light across polished wood. My family occupies the first row like dignitaries at a state function. My mother wears black silk that probably cost more than most people spend on rent. My father's suit is perfectly tailored, his tie knotted with military precision he never earned. Aaron sits between them in a dress that manages to look both funeral appropriate and camera ready. They don't notice me at first. Why would they? I'm supposed to be invisible. The unwanted daughter relegated to parking lots and unanswered letters. I choose a seat 3 rows back directly behind them, close enough to hear my mother whisper logistics to my father, close enough to watch Erin check her phone during the pastor's opening remarks, close enough to be unavoidable when they finally turn around. It happens during the hymn, some song about eternal rest that Grandpa would have tolerated but never requested. My mother glances over her shoulder to acknowledge late arrivals, and her eyes find mine. The color drains from her face like water from a broken vessel. She nudges my father, who turns with the annoyed expression of someone being interrupted during important business. His reaction is sharper, a visible flinch that ripples through his practiced composure. Erin follows their gaze. When she sees me, her hymnal slips from her fingers and hits the floor with a sound that draws stares from nearby mourners. I don't smile, don't nod, don't acknowledge their shock with anything more than the steady gaze of someone who belongs exactly where she is. The service continues around us. The pastor speaks about Grandpa's life, his service in Korea, his work as a civil engineer, his devotion to family, standard eulogy language that transforms a complex man into comfortable phrases. But he doesn't mention the grandfather who taught his oldest granddaughter to read maps and build bridges. Doesn't speak about the veteran who recognized something worth nurturing in a serious little girl who preferred structure to charm. That story isn't part of their narrative. The final hymn ends with the soft thud of closing hymnals. The pastor invites mourners to join the family for graveside services at Restland Cemetery. My family rises in practiced unison, moving toward the center aisle like actors hitting their marks. That's when I hear it, a rhythmic sound from outside, footsteps in formation, the unmistakable cadence of military precision cutting through suburban quiet. Heads turn toward the sanctuary doors. Conversations pause mid-sentence. The sound grows louder, more distinct, deliberate, purposeful. 12 Marines enter in perfect formation. They move down the center aisle with the kind of precision that can't be faked or forgotten. Dress blues that rival mine for attention to detail. Ribbons and medals that tell stories of service in places most people can't pronounce. At their head walks a man I recognize immediately. General James Harrison, retired 4-star former commanding officer, and the closest thing to a father figure the Army ever gave me. His presence fills the sanctuary the way only genuine authority can. The formation halts 3 pews from the front. General Harrison steps forward, his movement sharp enough to cut glass. Every eye in the sanctuary follows him as he approaches me. He stops, comes to attention, raises his hand in a salute that carries 27 years of military protocol and personal respect. General T. Morgan, ma'am. His voice carries to every corner of the sanctuary, clear, formal, impossible to misunderstand. We're here to honor your grandfather and the soldier he helped shape. The silence that follows feels like held breath. No rustling programs, no shifting bodies, just the weight of recognition that changes everything in the space of a heartbeat. I stand and return his salute. The movement feels like coming home. Thank you, General Harrison. Thank you all. Behind him, 11 Marines stand at attention. Men and women I've served with, trained, led into situations where leadership meant the difference between success and catastrophe. People who understand that some bonds transcend family ties. They didn't come as representatives of the Marine Corps. They came as individuals whose lives intersected with mine in ways that matter. They came because respect is earned, not inherited. My father takes a step backward, his confident posture crumbling like a poorly constructed fortification under sustained assault. My mother's funeral bouquet slips from her hands. White roses scatter across polished wood, their petals bright against dark suits and military precision. Erin goes pale. The color that usually glows like captured sunlight drains away until she looks like a photograph, left too long in direct light. From the back of the sanctuary, a familiar voice cuts through the silence. If I may interrupt this service for a legal matter. Sarah Mitchell moves down the aisle with a leather portfolio tucked under her arm. Her appearance transforms the gathering from funeral to courtroom in the span of a footstep. I represent Colonel Morgan in matters relating to the estate of Thomas Morgan, deceased. She opens the portfolio and removes documents that rustle like autumn leaves in the sanctuary's silence. Mr. Thomas Morgan's last will and testament, filed with the Montgomery County Clerk's office, names Colonel Tara Morgan as sole beneficiary of his estate. The words land like artillery in the hushed space. This includes all real property financial accounts and personal effects. The will is legally binding and supersedes any previous arrangements. No shouting, no arguments, no dramatic confrontations. Just the reading of legal truth that strips away 8 years of lies and leaves the facts exposed like bones in desert sand. I turn toward the sanctuary doors without speaking. My face reveals nothing. Not satisfaction, not vindication, not relief. Just the controlled expression of someone who's learned to win battles without declaring victory. The Marines fall into formation behind me as I walk down the aisle. 12 witnesses to the moment when invisible became undeniable, when the forgotten daughter reclaimed her grandfather's legacy and her own identity in the same breath. Behind us, the sanctuary erupts in whispers that will become stories, stories that will become legend in a small Maryland town where people remember the day a family learned the difference between having a name and earning one. But we're already gone, moving into sunlight that feels like dawn after the longest night of the year. The letter arrives on a Tuesday morning 3 weeks after the funeral, mixed in with utility bills and marketing mail, like any other piece of ordinary correspondence. Plain white envelope. No return address. Just my name written in handwriting I've known since childhood. My father's penmanship hasn't changed. Still the careful script of an engineer who learned that precision matters, that measurements must be exact, or structures fail. The same handwriting that signed birthday cards when I was small, back when I believed those signatures meant something more than obligation. I set the envelope on my kitchen counter in Grandpa's house, my house now, and let it rest there while I make coffee. The kitchen still smells faintly of his aftershave and the pipe tobacco he thought no one knew he smoked. His coffee mug sits in the cabinet where he left it unwashed, carrying the ghost of his last morning routine. The house feels larger with just me in it, but not empty. His presence lingers in the careful organization of everything, tools arranged by size in the garage books, sorted by subject in the study photographs, displayed chronologically on the mantel. A life structured with the same precision I've always craved. The letter waits while I drink coffee from a mug that says, "World's Greatest Grandpa," in faded blue letters. A gift from Erin when she was 10 back, when we still believed in simple truths like greatest and always and forever. Finally, I open the envelope. The letter is brief, 1 page, no letterhead or formal structure, just words arranged in the same careful script that once taught me to write my own name. Tara. I've been sitting in my study for 3 weeks, trying to find words that matter, trying to find something that undoes 24 years of not seeing you clearly. I keep coming back to the moment in the church when that general saluted you. When I realized that strangers understood your worth better than your own father, I was wrong. About everything. About the army being a waste. About your choices being mistakes. About you being too rigid for your own good. You weren't too rigid. You were strong. And I mistook strength for stubbornness because I never learned the difference. Your mother says we should move on from this. Put it behind us. Go back to normal. But normal was us stealing from you while you served your country. Normal was us lying about your grandfather's will while you honored his memory in places we'll never see. Normal was wrong. You deserved better. You deserved parents who celebrated your promotions instead of hiding them. You deserved a family who saw your medals as honors instead of embarrassments. You deserved to be invited to your own grandfather's funeral. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect anything. I just wanted you to know that I finally see what he saw in you all those years ago. I hope you find peace in the life you've built without us. Dad. I read it twice, then a third time searching for the catch that never comes. No requests, no conditions, no attempts to minimize or explain away 24 years of indifference. Just acknowledgement wrapped in handwriting that carries the weight of everything that should have been said decades ago. I fold the letter along its original creases and set it beside my coffee mug. The paper is ordinary, drugstore stationery that probably came from the same drawer where he kept bills and grocery lists. Nothing special about the medium that carries words heavy enough to rewrite history. Outside the kitchen window, autumn spreads across the backyard where Grandpa taught me to identify trees by their leaves. Maple and oak and birch that change color according to their own schedule, regardless of what anyone expects or demands. Change happens when it happens, not when it's convenient or requested or overdue. The letter sits on the counter like an artifact from an archaeological dig, evidence of a civilization that existed before I learned to stop expecting approval from people who never learned to give it. I should feel something. Relief, maybe? Vindication. The satisfaction of being right about everything I'd suspected for decades. Instead, I feel empty. Not sad, not angry. Just empty like a building after everyone has moved out and the echoes have finally faded. The words are kind, honest, probably true, but they arrive too late to change anything that matters. They can't restore the money stolen while I bled for strangers. Can't return the invitations never sent or the celebrations never shared. Can't resurrect the daughter who spent 30 years trying to earn love that was never available for purchase. That daughter is gone. Has been gone since the moment I decided to walk my own line instead of chasing approval down paths that led nowhere. I whisper the truth to the empty kitchen, to the ghost of my grandfather's aftershave, to the woman I've become in the space left by the girl who used to care. You don't get to define me anymore. The words feel like exhaling after holding my breath for 3 decades, like setting down weight I'd forgotten I was carrying, like freedom. The abandoned lot sits 3 blocks from the downtown shelter, a forgotten patch of concrete, where a restaurant once served tourists and businessmen. Now it hosts the quiet table, 6 folding tables arranged under a simple canopy surrounded by plastic chairs that have seen better decades. I arrive at 5:30 every morning when the city still sleeps, and the only witnesses are streetlights and the occasional patrol car that slows to check on the woman unloading supplies from a pickup truck. No signs announce what happens here. No mission statements or organizational charts. Just coffee and breakfast for people who know the weight of carrying everything they own in a backpack. The idea came to me during my first week in Grandpa's house, sitting in his study surrounded by photographs of the life he'd built through quiet service, Korean War veterans, engineering projects, community work that never made headlines but held the foundation together. I used part of his inheritance, my inheritance, to lease the lot and buy equipment, industrial coffee makers, folding tables, cases of disposable cups that disappear faster than morning fog. Nothing fancy. Nothing that requires speeches or photo opportunities. Just a place where people can sit down for 20 minutes and remember what it feels like to be seen as human. My first customer was a woman named Dorothy, who walked with the careful pace of someone whose feet had carried her farther than they were designed to go. She approached the table like it might disappear if she moved too quickly. "Is this real?" she asked. "Coffee's real. Breakfast is real. No strings attached." She sat down slowly, wrapping arthritic fingers around a disposable cup like it was precious metal. "I was Navy," she said after her first sip. "Long time ago, before they let women do real jobs." I poured my own coffee and sat across from her. "What rate?" "Electronics technician." "Radar systems, mostly." She smiled with pride that 20 years of homelessness hadn't erased. Could fix anything that ran on electricity and stubbornness. We talked for an hour. About ships and service and the particular way military training shapes your spine, even when everything else falls apart. When she left, she shook my hand with the firm grip of someone who remembered how to stand at attention. "Same time tomorrow?" she asked. "Every morning, 7 days a week." Word spread the way it does among people who live by shared intelligence networks. Veterans told other veterans. The homeless community mapped the quiet table into their daily routines like a supply depot they could count on. They come in waves. Early risers at 6 a.m. who want coffee before the city wakes up. Working homeless who grab breakfast before day labor lines form. Night shift people heading home to sleep in doorways and abandoned buildings. I learned their names slowly. Tommy, who served 2 tours in Iraq before PTSD and alcohol cost him everything except his sense of humor. Maria, who drove supply trucks in Afghanistan and now lives in her car with her teenage daughter. Frank, who fixes bicycles with tools he carries in a shopping cart, trading repairs for food and shelter. They don't ask why I'm here, don't question the civilian clothes or the absence of organizational affiliation. In their world, motives matter less than consistency. Showing up matters more than explanations. I pour coffee, pass out bananas and bagels and granola bars, clean tables between customers. The work requires no special skills beyond the ability to see people who've become invisible to everyone else. The routine becomes meditation: fill cups, clear trash, restock supplies. Simple tasks that anchor me to purpose without requiring justification or applause. No one salutes. No one asks about my service record or combat experience. I'm just the woman who brings coffee at dawn and doesn't ask questions that make people defensive about their circumstances. 3 months and a Vietnam veteran named Walter settles into his usual chair and watches me work with eyes that have seen everything twice. His hair is white and wild, his jacket held together with duct tape and determination. He speaks maybe 10 words a week, usually thank you, and coffee's good. This morning, he waits until the crowd thins before approaching the serving station where I'm refilling the coffee urns. "You were military," he says. Not a question. I nod. "Thought so. Can tell by how you move. How you set up your operation here." He gestures at the tables arranged for maximum efficiency and sight lines. "You still carry yourself like you're in charge of something important." "Sometimes I forget I'm not." He laughs a sound like gravel shifting in a bucket. That's the thing about service. It changes your wiring. Even when the mission ends, you keep looking for ways to serve. I hand him a fresh cup of coffee. He wraps his fingers around it with the same careful reverence I've seen in 100 faces over the past 3 months. "You know what I see when I watch you work," he continues. "When I see someone who understands that showing up is the whole job. Not the glamorous part, not the part that gets you medals or thank you letters. Just the part where you show up every day because people need you to show up." He takes a sip of coffee and looks around at the other veterans scattered across folding chairs, reading newspapers and sharing stories and existing in a space where they're welcome. "You're one of us," he says finally. "You still show up. That's what counts." The words hit deeper than any commendation or promotion ceremony, deeper than the Bronze Star or the funeral salute or the general who called me by rank in front of people who'd forgotten my worth. I smile. For the first time in years, maybe decades, it feels real. Not performed for an audience or calculated for effect. Just genuine response to genuine recognition. "Thank you, Walter." He nods once and returns to his table where he'll sit for another hour before disappearing into the city until tomorrow morning brings him back. I clean the coffee urns and stack chairs and load the truck with empty containers. The same routine I'll repeat tomorrow and the day after that, and every day until my hands can't hold steady enough to pour coffee, or my legs can't carry me to this forgotten lot where forgotten people remember what community looks like. These hands have carried rifles and bandaged wounds and signed orders that changed lives across continents. They folded flags and built bridges and served purposes larger than personal ambition. Now they pour coffee and pass fruit and clean tables where people who've lost everything can sit down for 20 minutes and remember what it feels like to matter. These hands still serve. And that's enough. That's everything. It's been 6 months since the funeral. 6 months since 12 Marines walked into a church and changed everything with a single salute. I'm sitting in Grandpa's study, my study now surrounded by the books that taught me to build bridges, and the photographs that prove some bridges are worth crossing. The Bronze Star sits on his desk beside a coffee-stained mug from the quiet table, and a letter from Private Martinez's daughter, who wants to be a soldier when she grows up. The silence here is different than the silence I knew growing up. This silence feels full instead of empty, complete instead of broken. My phone buzzes with updates from the world beyond these walls. Aaron's latest art exhibition. My parents' vacation photos from somewhere expensive and distant. Lives that continue in perfect formation, unmarked by my absence. I don't feel anger when I see their posts. Don't feel the old ache of wanting to belong to something that was never designed to include me. I feel nothing, which might be the greatest victory of all. The story I've told you isn't unique. You know that, don't you? You know because you've lived versions of it yourself. Maybe your family never saw you either. Maybe they still don't. Maybe you're watching this on your phone during a break from a job that doesn't appreciate you, or in a room where you feel invisible even when you're standing right there. Maybe you've spent years trying to earn love from people who were never capable of giving it. Maybe you've sacrificed pieces of yourself for approval that never came. Maybe you've stood outside your own life, watching other people celebrate achievements you helped make possible. If that's you, if any part of this feels familiar, I want you to know something. You're not invisible. Not to me. I see you in the comments section typing words like thank you, and this is my story too. And I needed to hear this today. I see you sharing pieces of your own battles, your own moments of being overlooked and undervalued and forgotten by people who should have known better. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. Tell me what boots you've worn, what lines you've had to walk alone. Tell me about the grandpas who saw you clearly and the families who couldn't be bothered to look. Tell me about the moment you realized you were enough just as you are, without their approval or recognition or love. Because here's what I've learned. Family isn't always the people who share your name. Sometimes it's the people who share your values. Sometimes it's the woman who pours coffee at dawn for people the world has forgotten. Sometimes it's 12 Marines who travel across 3 states to honor a man they never met because they understand what honor looks like. Sometimes it's strangers on the internet who say, "Me too," and "I see you," and "Thank you for walking your own line." The quiet table opens every morning at 6 a.m. Walter is always first in line, followed by Dorothy and Tommy and Maria, and dozens of others who understand that showing up is the whole job. They don't need my medals or my rank or my family's approval to see my worth. They see it in the coffee that's always hot, and the chairs that are always clean, and the woman who keeps coming back day after day because some people are worth serving. Some people are worth everything. The miracle I'm living now isn't loud. It doesn't come with parades or ceremonies or speeches that make the evening news. It walks in boots worn thin by service. It stands behind you when the world turns away. It pours coffee for people who remember what it means to be seen. Sometimes the miracle isn't loud. Sometimes it walks in boots and stands behind you when the world turns away.